Dr. Haywan had been falling through space for 3 minutes when she realized she was going to die. The ship around her groaned and twisted, metal screaming as the asteroid storm tore it apart piece by piece. Alarms screamed in the darkness, and red emergency lights painted everything the color of blood. She moved by instinct, not by thought, her hands moving across the control panel of her research vessel with the muscle memory of 20 years in the field. But there was nothing left to control. The shields were gone. The engines were dead. The celestial observer, her home for the last 6 months, was becoming scrap metal and frozen vapor. She slammed her hand on the emergency pod release and felt the small chamber beneath her feet disconnect with a violent shudder. The pod ejected from the dying ship just as the hull fractured around it. Through the small reinforced window, Haywan watched her entire research project, years of data about Vorthian migration patterns, months of carefully collected samples, disappear into the cosmic dust. She thought about crying, but there was no time. The pod was spinning, and something had struck it during the explosion. The navigation system was offline. The fall through Kethros Prime's atmosphere was like being inside a furnace. Heat surrounded the pod, making the metal glow red. Haywan gripped the armrests and held her breath, wondering if this was how her life would end alone in a metal coffin, burning up over a moon that no one on Earth had ever heard of. Then, suddenly, the resistance lessened. The pod had passed through the thickest part of the atmosphere. The spinning slowed. Haywan's stomach lurched as gravity took hold of her, pulling her down toward the rocky surface below. The crash came without warning. One moment she was descending through clear sky, and the next moment the world exploded upward to meet her. The pod hit the ground hard, bouncing once, twice, then sliding sideways along a rocky canyon floor before finally coming to rest against a wall of jagged purple crystal. The impact knocked the breath from Haywan's lungs and sent her head spinning against the side of the window. For several moments, she could do nothing but lie there and breathe, grateful that her body still remembered how. Slowly, her training took over. She ran a check of her systems. The emergency beacon was active and transmitting. Good. That meant there was a chance of rescue. The food synthesizer was damaged, very damaged. She could see the crack in its central chamber, and the way the circuits inside had sparked and burned. That was not good. She checked her emergency rations. 7 days' worth of high-calorie paste, along with water tablets and basic vitamins. That would keep her alive long enough for a rescue team to find her, assuming anyone was close enough to respond. The day cycle on Kethros Prime was long, nearly 30 hours. Haywan used the first half of it to secure her pod and establish a basic camp. She had a tent made from emergency fabric, a water purifier, and communication equipment that worked on backup power. She also had her field notes and her camera, which had been in her emergency pack. If she was going to be stranded, she might as well continue her research. It was what she did. It was who she was. As the long day wore on, Haywan began to study her surroundings more carefully. The canyon where she had landed was beautiful in a harsh way. Massive formations of crystal rose from the ground like the buildings of some alien city. The stones caught the light from Kethros Prime's sun and threw it back in shades of purple and blue and deep green. The ground was rocky and barren, with only a few patches of low-growing vegetation, hardy plants that had adapted to the moon's thin atmosphere and long seasons. She had read about Kethros Prime in the colonial databases before her mission. It was too harsh for settlements, too unstable for long-term mining operations. It was a place people passed through, never a place people stayed, which made it a good place to find Vorthians. They loved harsh places. They thrived in environments that would kill most other species. Haywan was examining a stand of crystalline growth near her camp when she first heard the sound. It was low and distant, barely audible over the soft whisper of the wind, but she had heard it before, in recordings and through the sensors of her research ship. It was the call of a Vorthian. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to the small defensive weapon at her belt. Every instinct from her training screamed at her to get back to the pod and lock the doors. Vorthians were apex predators. They were territorial. They were aggressive. They killed anything that threatened them or competed with them for resources. The databases were full of examples. HFY had read them all, but something made her stay still. The call came again, and this time, she heard something else beneath it. A note of desperation. Almost of pain. She waited, hidden behind a formation of crystal, as a shape emerged from the shadows of the canyon. At first, she thought it was small, a creature only a few meters long, with massive shoulders and powerful limbs. Then she realized why it seemed small. It seemed small because she had only ever seen adult Vorthians in sensor data and videos. This was a cub. The young Vorthian was barely a quarter the size of an adult, though still larger than a grown human. Its scales were dull and matted, lacking the bright iridescence that marked a healthy member of the species. Its flanks were thin, with ribs showing beneath its skin. It moved slowly and carefully, each step deliberate and tired. This was not a creature that had been fed well recently. HFY watched as the cub moved through the canyon, stopping now and then to sniff at the ground. It was hunting, she realized, or searching for food of some kind. It was hungry. The knowledge should have frightened her. A hungry predator was unpredictable. But instead, she found herself thinking about something else. She found herself thinking about why a young Vorthian would be alone, away from the protection of its pod. The answer, she suspected, was not a kind one. The cub moved closer to her camp without seeming to notice her presence. It paused when it caught the scent of her ration pack, which lay on a rock outside her tent. Its head came up, and its nostrils flared. For a moment, HFY could see the battle happening inside the creature's mind, the hunger warring with caution, the instinct to hunt conflicting with the understanding that a human was a dangerous, unknown thing. The cub took a careful step forward, then another. Its eyes, large and yellow and intelligent, fixed on the ration pack. HFY made a decision in that moment that would change everything. She did not reach for her weapon. She did not run. She did not shout or try to scare the creature away. Instead, she stood up from behind the crystal formation and walked slowly toward her camp, toward the cub, toward something that every single part of her training told her was insane. The cub froze. It watched her with those intelligent eyes, trying to understand what this small creature was doing. Was it a threat? Was it challenging for the food? The cub growled, a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within its chest. But it did not attack. It waited. HFY reached her tent. She picked up the ration pack with steady hands, even though her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her own ears. She looked at the cub, and the cub looked at her. Then, slowly and deliberately, she opened the pack and divided the contents into two portions. One for herself, one for the starving creature before her. She placed the larger portion on the ground between them and stepped back. The cub did not move at first. It stared at the offered food as if it might be a trap. Then, slowly, hunger won the war inside it. It stepped forward and began to eat. HFY sat down on a nearby rock and watched. She did not know if she had just made the best decision of her life or the worst. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not going to be alone on Kethros Prime. And neither was the cub. That, she thought, was a beginning of something. She just did not know what. The cub ate like it had never expected to eat again. Its massive head bent low over the food, and it consumed the ration paste in great gulps, barely pausing to breathe. HFY sat very still on her rock, watching every movement of the creature. She kept her hands where the cub could see them. She kept her breathing steady and slow. She did nothing that might startle it or make it think she was a threat. The seconds stretched into minutes, and the cub continued eating until every trace of the food was gone from the ground. When it finished, the young Vorthian sat back on its haunches and looked at HFY. It made a small sound. Not quite a growl, but not quite friendly either. It was, Haywan thought, a sound of confusion. In the world of the Vorthians, creatures did not share food. Creatures fought for food. The strong ate, and the weak starved. That was the way of things. Yet here was a small, fragile human creature that had given away half of its own rations to a stranger. It made no sense. The cub took a few steps closer and sniffed the air around Haywan. She did not move. She did not reach out to touch it. She simply sat and let the creature examine her at close range. She could smell it now, a scent like burnt metal and something older and wilder, something that belonged to predators and night hunts and open skies. The cub's breath came in hot waves as it investigated her with its senses. Then, as suddenly as it had come close, the cub backed away. It moved to a sheltered spot near the canyon wall, lay down, and seemed to fall asleep instantly. Haywan realized then that this creature was not just hungry. It was exhausted. The young Vorthian was running on empty, and the food had been enough to pull it over the edge into sleep. She spent most of the night awake, watching the sleeping cub. She kept a small distance, but close enough to observe. The creature's breathing was deep and steady. Sometimes it twitched in its sleep, and small growls came from its throat. Haywan wondered what Vorthians dreamed about. Did they dream of their pods? Did they dream of hunts? Did they dream of the reason they had been abandoned? When the long day finally came and light returned to Kethros Prime, Haywan was exhausted but exhilarated. She had survived the night with a predator. More than that, the predator had not attacked her. It had simply slept. The cub woke slowly as the sun rose. Its eyes opened and found her immediately. She had moved to her campfire and was preparing her own breakfast. A small portion of ration paste and water. The cub watched her with keen interest. Haywan took a bite of her food and then, deliberately, held out a small piece toward the cub. For a moment, nothing happened. The young Vorthian did not move. Then, slowly, it stood and walked over to Haywan. The trust was not complete. The cub would not eat from her hand, but it took the offered piece of food and ate it. This time, the eating was slower. This time, there was almost a gentleness to it. Over the next 3 days, a pattern emerged between them. Haywan divided her rations carefully, making sure both she and the cub got enough to survive. But 3 days of half portions was not sustainable. She needed to find another way. On the 4th day, she began to explore the canyon more thoroughly, looking for sources of food that did not come from her dwindling supply. She found crystalline berries growing on hardy plants beneath overhangs. They were bitter and hard to chew, but they were edible. She found small creatures, insect-like things with multiple legs that she could trap and cook over her fire. The cub turned out to be excellent at hunting these creatures once she showed it what she was trying to do. Within an hour of her first attempt, the young Vorthian had caught enough to feed both of them for a meal. Haywan began to document everything. She used her camera to record the cub's behavior. She noted how quickly it learned new tasks. She observed how it seemed to understand cause and effect, how it anticipated what she wanted it to do. This was not a mindless beast. This was an intelligent creature with the capacity to think and plan. She also began to understand something else. The cub had been abandoned. She was certain of it now. She had reviewed the database information about Vorthian pods during her crash landing preparations. Vorthians lived in family groups, and the cubs were protected fiercely by the adults. For a young one to be alone in the wilderness, it meant something had gone wrong. Either the pod had been destroyed, or the cub had been cast out. And given how desperate and malnourished it had been when she first saw it, Haywan suspected the latter. She suspected that somewhere on this moon, a Vorthian pod had decided that this particular cub was not worth the resources it would take to raise. On the 6th day, she gave the cub a name. She called it Teo, after a Korean word meaning great nature or great world. It was a name she had always loved, and it seemed right for this creature that represented nature in its purest and wildest form. Teo learned his name quickly. By the 7th day, When Hei-Won called out Teo, the cub would turn and come to her, ready for whatever came next. Whether it was a hunt or a shared meal, or simply a time to sit and rest, Teo had learned that the small human was the center of his world now. Hei-Won also noticed the physical changes in him. His scales, once dull and matted, were beginning to shine. His ribs were less prominent. His eyes had become brighter, more alert. His movements were more confident. The creature was healing, not just from hunger but from something deeper. The cub was learning that the world was not a place of pure competition and abandonment. It was learning that another creature, even a fragile one like a human, could offer something that no predatory instinct could provide: security, companionship, care. On the 7th night, as they sat together near her campfire, Hei-Won looked at Teo and thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. The asteroid storm that had destroyed her ship, the crash that had brought her to this canyon, the moment she had decided to share her rations instead of running away. Every decision, every moment, had led to this cub sleeping peacefully at her side. She did not know how long she could sustain both of them on the food available on this moon. She did not know if her emergency beacon had been received or if a rescue ship was on its way. She did not know what would happen when other humans arrived and found her living peacefully beside a young Vorthian predator. But in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, it had been worth it to see this creature alive. It had been worth it to know that a simple act of kindness, the sharing of a meal before shame could take root in a hungry creature's heart, had been enough to change everything. Teo made a soft sound in his sleep, and Hei-Won reached out and gently touched his scaled shoulder. The cub did not wake, but something in his breathing changed. He seemed to relax even deeper into rest. Hei-Won smiled to herself and looked up at the strange stars above Kethros Prime. Somewhere out there, a rescue ship was coming. Somewhere out there, other people would soon arrive. But for now, in this moment, the two of them were together. And that was enough. The rescue ship appeared on the horizon on the 9th day. Hei-Won saw it first as a small, bright point in the purple sky, then as a growing shape that resolved itself into the unmistakable form of an Earth Coalition vessel. The ship's approach brought with it a strange mixture of emotions. Relief flooded through her. She had survived. She would be going home. But there was also a tightness in her chest, a heavy feeling that settled in her stomach and would not go away. Teo sensed her distress. The young Vorthian moved close to her and made a soft growling sound that was almost like a question. Hei-Won reached out and placed her hand on his head. She had not meant to create a bond with this creature. That had not been part of her plan. But here they were, and the bond existed whether she had intended it or not. The ship descended slowly, its massive bulk blocking out the sun as it passed overhead. Landing jets fired, creating clouds of dust that swept across the canyon. Hei-Won covered her face and turned away from the wind. Teo hissed and backed toward the shelter of the canyon wall. He did not like this, Hei-Won realized. The noise and the violence of the landing frightened him. When the dust settled, a ramp descended from the ship's belly, and figures emerged. They were human, wearing the gray and blue uniforms of the United Earth Coalition Navy. They moved with the precision of trained soldiers, weapons held ready even though Hei-Won was clearly alone and unarmed. At least, they thought, she was alone. Commander Park Jin-ho was the first to reach her. He was a tall man with dark hair and a stern expression, and he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed. His eyes scanned her from head to foot, assessing her physical condition. Only when he seemed satisfied that she was not dying did he smile. "Dr. Hei-Won, we received your emergency beacon 6 days ago. The rescue was slow coming because of the ion storms in this sector, but we are here now. You are safe." His voice was warm, but his eyes were already scanning the canyon, looking at her camp. Then those eyes stopped and widened. "Is that a Vorthian?" Teo had emerged from behind the rocks, drawn toward Hei-Won by her presence. He was clearly wary of the new arrivals. But he also seemed to understand that Hei-Won was not afraid. His massive head swung back and forth between Hei-Wan and the commander, trying to understand this new situation. "That is Teo," Hei-Wan said calmly. "He was abandoned here. He was starving when I found him. I have been keeping him alive, and I have been documenting his behavior." Commander Park's expression shifted from relief to confusion, to something approaching alarm. "You have been what?" "Dr. Hei-Wan, do you understand what that creature is? Vorthians are apex predators. They are territorial and aggressive. The fact that you are still alive is frankly astonishing." "He is a cub," Hei-Wan said quietly. "He was abandoned by his pod. And he is intelligent, far more intelligent than the databases suggest. I have observed him learning new tasks, problem-solving, and responding to emotional cues." One of the other soldiers, Dr. Mi-sun, approached carefully. She was younger than Commander Park, with warm eyes and a kind expression. She carried a medical scanner and used it to check Hei-Wan's vital signs. As she worked, her eyes kept drifting to Teo, studying him with what appeared to be genuine scientific interest rather than fear. "This is remarkable," Mi-sun said softly. "Look at the scale condition. This cub has clearly been recovering from severe malnutrition. The fact that it trusted you enough to eat shows a level of behavioral flexibility that contradicts everything we know about Vorthian aggression patterns." "Exactly," Hei-Wan said. "That is why I need to bring him with us. My research could revolutionize our understanding of Vorthian intelligence and psychology. These findings could change everything about how we interact with this species." Commander Park shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. The creature will have to be sedated and contained. We have a secure facility for it back at the station. It will be held in proper conditions and studied under controlled circumstances." "No," Hei-Wan said. The word came out sharp and clear. "I will not abandon him. I made a commitment to this creature. I kept him alive, and I am responsible for his welfare." "Your responsibility is to yourself and to this mission," Commander Park replied. "The creature is a wild animal. It will revert to its instincts at any moment. You are letting sentiment cloud your judgment." Hei-Wan looked at Teo. The young Vorthian had moved even closer, and his large head was now only a few meters from where she stood. His yellow eyes watched everything, missing nothing. Then she looked back at Commander Park. "If you sedate him and take him by force, I will make a complete record of your actions. I will include video evidence of his intelligent behavior, documentation of his learning capacity, and testimony that he was never aggressive toward me. I will submit this to the Galactic Council of Species Rights, and I will tell them that the United Earth Coalition captured a sentient being and placed it in captivity against its will." Commander Park's expression hardened. "That is a threat, Dr. Hei-Wan." "No," she said. "That is a fact." Mi-sun stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on Hei-Wan's shoulder, and then turned to face the commander. "With respect, sir, Dr. Hei-Wan's research is valuable. If even half of her observations are accurate, this could advance our understanding of alien psychology by decades. We could bring the cub to the research facility under Dr. Hei-Wan's direct supervision. There would be proper containment protocols, yes, but also proper study conditions." Commander Park was silent for a long moment. Hei-Wan could see the conflict playing out behind his eyes. Military orders versus scientific advancement. Protocol versus possibility. "1 week," he finally said. "The creature comes with us, but it stays sedated during transport and remains in secure containment once we reach Kepler Station. Dr. Hei-Wan, you will be its primary handler, but you will work within our safety protocols. If at any point the creature shows signs of aggression or unpredictability, we will terminate it. Am I clear? We will terminate. Am I clear? We will terminate. We will terminate. Am I clear?" Hei-Wan nodded. It was not ideal, but it was better than leaving Teo to die on this abandoned moon. As the medical team prepared a sedative for Teo, Hei-Wan spent her last few hours alone with him. She sat beside the sleeping cub and placed her hand on his scaled chest. feeling his heart beat beneath her palm. She did not know what the future held for either of them. She did not know if bringing him to the station would save him or doom him. But she knew that she had to try. "I am sorry," she whispered to the sleeping creature. "I am sorry I cannot keep you safe from what comes next. But I promise you this. I will fight for you. No matter what." Teo made a small sound in his sleep, as if he understood. And then, the workers arrived. To carry him to the ship, Kepler's station orbited high above Kethros Prime, a massive structure of metal and reinforced crystal that housed scientists, military personnel, and researchers from a dozen different departments. It had been designed to study alien life forms and advanced technology, and it was equipped with laboratories, observation chambers, and containment facilities that could hold almost anything the galaxy could throw at it. HFY had worked here for a brief time before her research mission. And she had not liked it much then. She liked it even less now. Teo's containment facility was in Sub-Level 3, a section of the station devoted to high-security biological research. The chamber was large and well-designed by scientific standards. It included climbing structures, rock formations, and even a small pool of water. Sensors lined the walls, recording every movement the cub made. HFY understood the necessity of the containment, but she hated the way it turned Teo's recovery into a performance for unseen observers. The first weeks at the station were critical. Teo woke from sedation terrified and confused, and HFY spent hours simply sitting with him, talking softly, and offering him food. Gradually, he began to recognize her voice and her scent. Gradually, the panic faded. The cub learned that the containment chamber was not a prison, but a safe space where food appeared regularly, and where the small human came to visit him every day. HFY documented his progress meticulously. She recorded his behavior, his learning patterns, his emotional responses. She noted how quickly he adapted to new situations, how he solved problems, how he seemed to understand cause and effect. She filmed him playing with objects, investigating new food sources, and responding to her presence with what could only be described as affection. The data was remarkable. Revolutionary, even. It contradicted everything the scientific community thought it knew about Vorthian intelligence. Dr. Quan-Il was the station's lead researcher on alien behavioral patterns. He was a brilliant man, ambitious and driven, and he became immediately interested in HFY's findings about Teo. He studied her videos, reviewed her notes, and asked detailed questions about every aspect of the cub's behavior. HFY was pleased to have a colleague who understood the significance of her research. At first, then one day, Quan-Il came to her with a proposal. "Your work is fascinating," he said, sitting across from her in the research laboratory. "The adaptability you have documented in this cub is remarkable. It suggests that Vorthian behavioral patterns are far more flexible than we previously understood." "Yes," HFY agreed. "That is exactly what the data shows. It opens up so many possibilities for future research into how—" "It opens up military possibilities," Quan-Il interrupted. He smiled, and there was something in that smile that made HFY's stomach tighten. "Imagine, Dr. HFY, Vorthians are already apex predators with incredible physical capabilities. Now imagine if those capabilities could be combined with domestication and loyalty. Imagine a creature that was intelligent enough to follow complex orders, but loyal enough to never question them. A creature that could be trained from a young age to serve human interests. That would be invaluable." End quote. HFY stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we have an opportunity here. Your cub shows remarkable capacity for attachment and learning. It has bonded with you. Yes? That means it can bond with trainers. It means that Vorthian cubs, properly raised and conditioned, could be turned into soldiers. Enhanced soldiers. Military contractors would pay billions for such a capability." "No," HFY said flatly. "That is not what this research is for. Teo is not a weapon to be weaponized. Teo is an example," Quan-Il said. "One cub with remarkable behavior patterns. But imagine an entire generation of Vorthians raised from cubhood in human facilities. Imagine soldiers that are faster and stronger than anything we have. Soldiers that will follow orders without hesitation. We would be unstoppable. HFY stood up. I will not participate in this. My research is about understanding Vorthian intelligence and psychology, not about turning them into slaves or weapons. Quanil stood as well. His expression did not change, but something cold entered his eyes. Your refusal is noted, Dr. HFY. However, this decision is no longer in your hands. I have already submitted my proposal to the station commander and to the military board. Transfer of the cub to the Defense Research Facility is scheduled for 1 week from now. After that, what happens to him will be determined by people with different priorities than you have. HFY felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. You cannot do this. He is a sentient being. He has rights. He is an alien creature, with no legal standing under human law, Quanil said coldly. Your attachment to it is emotional, not rational. But do not worry. The creature will be well cared for. We simply have different uses in mind for it. HFY ran from the laboratory. She needed to think. She needed to understand what was happening and what she could do to stop it. She went directly to Teo's containment chamber. The cub had grown noticeably since arriving at the station. He was now nearly twice the size he had been on Kithros Prime. His scales bright and healthy. His body strong and muscular. But when he saw HFY, all that physical power seemed to shrink away, and he became a creature again. He came to the reinforced window that separated them and pressed his head against it, growling softly. I know, HFY whispered. I know. I know. She spent that night awake in her quarters, her mind racing. She thought about going to Commander Park, but she suspected that Quanil's military connections probably ran as deep as her own. She thought about trying to escape with Teo, but the station's security was too tight. She thought about giving up, accepting that this was beyond her control. But then she thought about that first moment in the canyon, when a starving cub had looked at her with desperate eyes, and she had decided to share her meal. She had made a choice then. She could not unmake it now. And Teo had made his choice too. In his own way, he had chosen to trust her. He had chosen to believe that the world held something other than abandonment and hunger and pain. HFY made a decision. She would not let that choice become a mistake. She would not let this creature be turned into a weapon. She would fight for him, even if she had to fight the entire military structure to do it. She just had to figure out how. In his containment chamber, Teo slept fitfully, his dreams full of the woman who had saved him and the fear that he might lose her. HFY worked carefully and quietly through the night. She knew the station's security systems well enough to stay away from the cameras and motion sensors in the less populated corridors. By the time the morning shift began, she had accessed the main communication array and prepared 3 separate transmissions. The first was to the Galactic Council of Species Rights. She included everything: her complete behavioral documentation of Teo, video evidence of his learning capacity, his emotional intelligence, his capacity for affection and trust. She included footage of him problem-solving, of him responding to her voice with recognition and care. She included her own testimony about how a creature that the databases classified as purely aggressive had chosen compassion when shown compassion, had chosen connection when offered connection. The second transmission went to independent news networks across the colony territories. HFY knew these networks fed information to larger media outlets that reached across multiple star systems. She attached human-readable summaries along with her data, making sure they understood the significance of what she had discovered. A young alien predator, abandoned by its own species, rescued by a human scientist. A bond formed not through dominance, but through simple acts of sharing and care. A revelation about the nature of intelligence itself, that it could exist in unexpected forms, and that it could bridge the distance between species. The third transmission was personal. It went to Dr. Mi-sun, the medical officer who had shown interest in Teo's case. In her message, Heywan explained everything: Kwanil's plans, the military's intentions, her fears about what would happen to Teo at the Defense Research Facility. She asked for help, knowing it was asking Mi-sun to risk her position and her career. As the messages were being transmitted, Heywan's heart pounded in her chest. There was no going back now. She had acted. And in doing so, she had set forces in motion that she could not control or predict. The question now was whether her gamble would pay off. The first response came within hours. The Galactic Council issued a preliminary injunction, preventing the transfer of Teo to any other facility pending their investigation. Kwanil's face turned purple with rage when he received the notification. He stalked into the laboratory where Heywan was working and slammed his hand on the table. "What did you do?" he demanded. "How did you contact the Galactic Council?" "I did my job," Heywan replied calmly. "I presented research evidence to the appropriate oversight bodies. That is what scientists do when they encounter ethical concerns." "You have no authority to do this," Kwanil snarled. "You will be held accountable for this interference." "I will." Kwanil. "You will what?" A new voice cut through the tension. Mi-sun stood in the doorway, and behind her stood Commander Park. The commander's expression was thoughtful and troubled. "Dr. Kwanil, I have just received a briefing about the nature of your proposed research. I am afraid I have some concerns about the ethical implications." "Ethical concerns are irrelevant," Kwanil spat. "This creature is a resource. It represents military potential. We have the right to study and utilize it as we see fit." "Do we?" Commander Park asked quietly. "I have just reviewed Dr. Heywan's research documentation. I have watched the same videos that are now being broadcast across 3 star systems. I have to tell you, Dr. Kwanil, that creature demonstrates more emotional capacity and behavioral flexibility than I would have thought possible. The question is no longer whether we can use it for military purposes. The question is whether we should." The news networks had already begun to report. By the next day, the story was spreading across the colony worlds and into the civilian populations. A human scientist saves an alien creature. The alien creature, despite its species' reputation for violence, responds with affection and learning. The military wants to turn it into a weapon. The human scientist fights back. People had opinions. Some thought Heywan was foolish for trusting a predator. Some thought she was heroic for standing up for a sentient being's rights. Some thought the military was taking an opportunity for power. Some thought the military was betrayed by a scientist's sentimentality. The debate raged across communication channels and social networks. The Galactic Council responded with increasing urgency. A representative was dispatched to Kepler Station to investigate personally. His name was Vostine, and he was a member of the Sethel species, tall and elegant, with skin that shifted colors subtly with his emotions. He carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Vostain's first action was to review all of Heywan's research. He spent hours in the laboratory, watching video after video of Teo's behavior. He asked detailed questions about every aspect of Heywan's methodology and observations. And then, he requested to meet Teo directly. Heywan brought him to the containment chamber. Teo's reaction to the Sethel was cautious. This was a stranger, after all, and larger than most visitors. But when Heywan remained calm and showed no fear, Teo seemed to understand that this being was not a threat. The young Vorthian approached the reinforced window, and Vostane placed his hand against the barrier on the other side. "Remarkable," Vostane said softly. "I have studied xenobiology for 4 decades, and I have never encountered a Vorthian demonstrating this level of behavioral adaptation. Your documentation is thorough, Dr. Heywan. Your methodology is sound, and your conclusions are clear. What will happen now?" Heywan asked. "Now," Vostane replied, "we make a determination about the creature's status. If my assessment concurs with your findings, Teo will be classified as a sentient being with full rights under galactic law. That means the military cannot use him as a weapon or a research subject without his consent. It means he will have choices about his own future. Over the next few days, Vostane conducted his own interviews and observations. He reviewed military records and interrogated Dr. Quanil about the proposed research. He examined the Ethics Committee's approval process and found numerous violations and oversights. By the time his investigation was complete, the situation at Kepler Station had shifted dramatically. Quanil was placed under arrest for conspiracy to violate species rights laws. Haywan's position and commending her for standing up for what she believed was right. The military board, faced with galactic scrutiny and the threat of sanctions, quietly withdrew their support for the weaponization project. But the most important moment came when Vostane made his formal determination. He stood before a viewing window overlooking Teo's containment chamber and spoke to the assembled observers. Based on my investigation and review of all available data, I find that the entity known as Teo demonstrates sufficient evidence of sentience, emotional intelligence, and behavioral complexity to warrant full classification as a sentient being under galactic law. This determination is irrevocable and binding across all member worlds and territories. Haywan felt tears spring to her eyes. It was done. Teo was safe. But then Vostane continued. The question now is what Teo chooses to do with his freedom. He may remain at this research facility as a voluntary participant in Dr. Haywan's continuing study, or he may request transfer to a Vorthian Cultural Center for education and integration into Vorthian society. Dr. Haywan, with your permission, I would like to communicate Teo's newfound status to him. Haywan nodded. Together, she and Vostane entered the containment chamber. Haywan explained to Teo, in words and gestures, and through the simple presence of her calm demeanor, that he was now free, that he had choices, that his life was his own. Teo listened with those intelligent yellow eyes. And when Haywan asked him what he wanted to do, he moved closer to her and pressed his head against her shoulder. It was a gesture of choice. It was a gesture of trust. It meant he wanted to stay.